first meeting of the Health and Human Services Committee for the 2013 session. I'm glad we're back. It's nice to see everybody. And I'm honored to once again be chairing this committee, which I consider to be one of the hardest working with the best members in the Georgia House. And we have a total of 38 members. Sometimes we have a little trouble getting 11, which has been our quorum here before, so I thank everybody on the committee for being here and being pretty prompt about coming. Other members that are not here often have a conflict of interest, and so to let everybody know, we will be moving our meetings to Mondays at 3 o'clock starting next Monday. And that is so that there are less meetings like regulated industries and other meetings that are meeting on top of us so that we can have a better attendance. So after this meeting, we will be meeting on Mondays at 3 o'clock. Like I said, we have 38 members and we have 7 new members. So let me introduce them. Timothy Barr, hold your hand up. I'm glad to have you. Bruce Broderick, thank you for being here. I'm glad to have you. Lee Hawkins had decided to join the best house after serving in the Senate. Now he knew where he needed to come home to. Rick Jaspers, just like that. I don't think Alan Peak is not here. Jimmy Pruitt is at Regulated Industries, and Dexter Sharper, who is from down in Valdosta. So welcome to the committee. And staff this year, of course, I have Joyce Norwood, my administrative assistant. Joyce, stand up. Like that. She's the best. And she knows how to find me, so if you're looking for me, she can always run me down. The first call usually comes at 7 o'clock every morning, if not earlier. And the best attorney and legislative counsel, Betsy Howerton. Yay, Betsy! Who is being overworked already this session. Sarah Dunn, my committee aide and researcher. I'm not, there we go, sorry, Sarah. My intern, and is Sheila. I'm not going to pronounce her last name because I'll do it wrong. Sheila, stand up wherever you are over there. Sheila's at Georgia State and applying to law school. Kevin Sullivan, Kevin, stand up. A fourth-year Emory medical student that will be with us for a month and probably will be so interested by the time he leaves in a month, we'll try to come back toward the end of session and work for us when he's not practicing or learning medicine. And Candace Farr, who is a second-year law student at Georgia State. Candace, did you stand up for everybody? And assigned to me out of the Speaker's office. So that is our staff, and if you need us, we will try to make ourselves available to you at as quick as we possibly can. So just get in touch with Joyce if you need to see me. And at this time, I would ask the members to look at the back of your folders to the rules of the Health Committee and review those. And then I would be ready to entertain a motion if we would keep the same rules that we've had before, and with the quorum being 11 members. Well, give people about 2 seconds. Thanks, Joe. Well, we do have 7 new members.
That's right.
Yeah, no, 8. Only 8. 9 now. Oh, that's right. Okay, 16 times. We only do it once every 2 years. Okay. Get it straight. Are we okay? Ready to go? Okay, I have a motion due pass. I've got a second. Any discussion? Questions? You push your button if you have a question. Hearing no questions, I'll call the vote. Everyone in favor of the adoption of the rules of the Health and Human Services Committee, say aye. Anyone opposed? No. Looks like the ayes have it. Okay, the quorum is 11, and you will know it mentions that we have subcommittees. I tend not to use subcommittees in health because that means only 3 or 4 people hear a bill. And I feel like our bills are so important and cover such important areas that I'd rather have as many members of the committee hear all aspects of the bill. And if we need to hear a bill and then hold it over to the next time, we can do that. But I feel like that informs and educates more members about the bills rather than using small subcommittees. I do reserve the right, if I ever need to, haven't done it yet, that I can remember, of using and appointing a subcommittee. But that's why, on a regular basis, I don't use the subcommittee. The other thing is, there are so many subcommittees meeting, we have trouble getting people to the big meetings because everybody's meeting on top of each other. Okay, at this time I'm going to turn it over to my secretary, who's on to be a chairman and has been my faithful sidekick for 8 years, Ed? Like that, and I'm glad he's still on our committee and still my sidekick. So, Ed, I'll let you take it over.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everybody back this year, and you're looking great, Madam Chair.
Oh, thanks.
At this time, I'd like to hear from Madam Chair in presenting House Bill 50.
For the returning members, I think this will look very familiar to you. It passed out of the committee last year. And what prompted this bill was a phone call from the stepfather of 3 young boys who had just lost their father from an overdose of narcotics. The father was a nurse anesthetist, and he had worked at a Cartersville hospital. And actually, they caught him shooting up in the surgical suite. He was fired, not reported. Of course, we have no reporting rules in the state of Georgia. Friends got him jobs at different little small areas as a nurse anesthetist for the next 2 years until he overdosed on heroin and died. And the stepfather was irate that no one had reported him, that no one had stopped him from practicing for those 2 years, and that no one had reached out to him to try to get him into a rehabilitation program. And that they lost their father, and we lost a nurse anesthetist, and it was a loss to the state of Georgia. So basically what this bill does is that it says that an LPN, a professional nurse, a registered professional nurse, an RN, or an advanced practice nurse, if they do anything that breaks their rules under their what their scope of practice, or if they are taking narcotics, or if they're basically drunk at work, or have a major incident, that incidents will be reported to the Board of Nursing for disciplinary action. And this is spelled out in the bill. Now, the one thing is, in the old bill, it said that the Board of Nursing shall find alternative programs. We changed that to may. Many of the other boards, at least the professional boards in the medical field, like the physician's board, the dental board, they have identified programs where if they have a physician who willingly will go and sign an order, they can go into rehabilitation like in a drug center or an alcohol center, and then when they have met the requirements of that treatment, they go back into practice under strict supervision. And so should the Board of Nursing decide to find that type of program and offer it to a nurse that's being disciplined, that will be their prerogative to do so. If they do that, the cost of that program, just like for dentists and doctors, will be at the nurses, will be the person who's been disciplined. They will have to pay for that. We did put in here that anybody that reports a nurse, if they do it in good faith, that's a colleague on the floor, the hospital, somebody in the nursing home, if they make that report to the Board of Nursing in good faith, they are not going to be held for civil or criminal liabilities. And if a physician is asked to examine a nurse they, as far as the disorder, being mental or alcohol or drugs, that they will not be held for civil or criminal liability. Now, the one problem that is very sad to me that came to my attention just this morning is that we are in a recession and we have cut everywhere. And all of the boards under the Secretary of State have seen pretty major cuts. And they are finding that they do not have the funds for enough investigators, and that the members of the board are working as hard as they can. And to instigate a program like this is going to be costly. Now, I would point out that we have a rule that what we charge for fees is supposed to be what it costs to run the program. And they're estimating, and there's no way to tell exactly how much this new program will cost, because we don't know how many nurses we have out there that are going to have problems and are going to be reported. But they have looked at states, the Secretary of State's office has looked at states around us, and they are estimating that a program will cost about $2 million. Currently, nurses are paying $4 million in fees to the Secretary of State's office, and that goes into the general fund. And they are only getting slightly over $2 million back. So if they really got back, which our law says, the amount of money that they pay in fees, it would cover this new program. But of course, in reality, we are in tight times. And, we are doing the best we can to balance the budget. So hopefully, as times get better, we gave them the option, and it's in the bill, that this program would go into effect when the funds are available. So hopefully, we will see better economic times, and the program could be instigated as soon as possible for the betterment of Georgia patients. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll start with Representative Pack, number 22.
Oh, I should have known it. Representative Pack would be the first question. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, first, thank you so much for bringing this bill, because I think it's very important that we have protecting the profession and patients in general, and it's a very laudable goal. I have one question, starting with line 21, about the reasonable cause. I notice it's not defined, at least in this bill. Is there another section where reasonable cause is in fact defined?
Betsy?
And the issue I have is we have similar bills like similar language like this in various code of conduct and professions, and without providing, for example, if I hear a fellow colleague saying that this nurse is not licensed, the question is, does that, if I'm a LPN, does that obligate me to report? Because I don't know what reasonable cause means.
Yeah, well, that's spelled out in the bill. If a person goes and says that they have a license as a nurse, and we have another law that says if you call yourself a nurse, that is against the law. So those are spelled out. We passed that one last year or the year before about posing as a nurse. And in the bill, it says, well, let's see. Using any word, abbreviations, figures, letters, title, sign, card, or device implying that such a person is a registered nurse, advanced practice nurse, or a licensed practice nurse, unless the person is duly licensed or recognized by the applicable board to practice as such under the provisions of this chapter. And also it says the board can decide which reports or which incidences do not rise to the level of being very serious. So that the board would develop these rules. And I will remind the committee that when a board of nursing or any board that comes under an area that we supervise, those rules come to me. And we retain the legislative authority, if we disagree with them, to object to those rules and come back in the next session and make changes. So this is just the way we've done it.
Yeah, follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Is it possible to, and I'm sure Madam Chairwoman had thought about this. Is it possible to raise the standard to actual knowledge of a violation? I'm afraid of the reasonable cause kind of caused me concern, because what may be reasonable to me might not be reasonable to someone else.
Well, I think that's why the board has the discretion to look at each incidence of report and decide whether it rises that concern. I mean, I'm not an attorney, Representative Hack, but I wonder if the same thing isn't applicable in reporting attorneys and reasonable cause. I mean, we leave discretion up.
Well, in the attorneys, it's aspirational, meaning we could do it if we wanted. It's not binding on us to do that. I know the goal is to report people who are in violation of the law. And I guess I have to wait and see what the board comes up with in terms of definition of reasonable cause. But
right. Let me ask Betsy too. Betsy, do they use reasonable cause in the other areas, like for other boards, like the?
Wouldn't the same problem? How would you have reasonable cause to believe they have a fraudulent diploma? Wouldn't that be the same problem?
I mean, I guess somebody could say the person told somebody else they didn't have one, or somebody, went to the same school and never saw them there, and then said something to somebody that, but you wouldn't have proof until the board looked at it. I mean, I'll be glad Representative Packett does have to go to the other house if it gets out of the Rules Committee and out of this committee, and I will have Betsy look and see what we have on the medical board, or if there's some way to tighten it down, but I think it may be a problem.
May I ask just a related question to that,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman? In terms of, I know there's a line in here in line 24, licensed healthcare professionals shall not be required. And I'm just not familiar with the process. How would someone find out whether or not another person had reported this person?
They wouldn't know it unless they talked about it. But I can tell you haven't really worked in a hospital or a nursing home.
That.
Well, out on the floors and stuff with the staff working together. It's pretty close-knit most of the times, and people, it's sort of like down here, Representative Pack, there are very few secrets. And as much as you would like things to stay quiet as you are reporting somebody very often, people find out pretty quickly that somebody's been reported. That's not proof, but you might not know, and we might have double reporting.
Number 29. Representative Kidd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chair, two questions, if I may. But first, I say that one of Mr. Dett's questions, line 24 through line 26, that only applies when a nurse is the patient, not just routine. That just applies when the nurse is the patient. My question follows back up to one of the first two questions, is that what if a nurse knows something but does not report? You got in here several times, they shall report. What if they don't report?
We don't have anything in there because how do you police that?
Right.
If I see something and I see somebody shoot up and I don't report it and nobody else sees it, how are you going to ever know about it? I think it's the feeling of the board. They would like to try to implement this and begin to see how this program works. And then see, as we do in many other areas, come back and see if we need to revisit the law. But, that's one of the problems. I would think, and am I wrong, Betsy, that if a hospital wanted to set up a procedure for reporting somebody, they could say that, if you observe something, you report it to your supervisor or to a certain administrator and this kind of thing, and that one person could be responsible.
I understand, because that could be a fine line of what they know and what they don't know.
I mean, we have in the bill that if they report or fails to report, they cannot be held for criminal or civil liabilities at this point. It's on line 83, 84, and 85.
Second question for me is a physician or a hospital has an employee that is not, quote unquote, a registered professional nurse, but performs some of the duties that are generally accepted to be those of a registered professional nurse. How are they to be treated? They're not licensed. They're performing duties that a nurse normally routinely does under the supervision of the doctor and so forth. But how would it affect them? Don't know.
Okay, I'm going to have to get the hospital lobbies to answer this. You don't have an answer. I would think if you have somebody that, nurses we're pretty proud of what we're able to do, and we don't like somebody else doing them. And I think we had to pass another bill to allow personal caregivers to be able to do some things that were considered nursing things. And it had a very specific bill that we did that about 3 years ago, so that people that had trachs and so forth, and that was for one specific person after they were trained and all. So I really think that if some hospital or some group is letting someone perform a duty that is defined under the Nurse Practice Act or under an Advanced Practice Nurse Act, am I correct? We've got the head of the Board of Nursing here. Then they are in violation of another law. Stand up and tell them who you are, Barry.
That'd be fine. Thank you. Last question, not a question, but a point. I fully understand and fully agree with you the aspect of investigators and so forth, being limited investigators. In another life years ago, the medical association, the medical board had a similar problem under George Busby's administration. And they went to the governor at that time and said, if we voluntarily raise our fees by X amount of dollars, would you direct that money specifically back to the board to hire their own investigators? And the governor did that, and the medical board, raised their fees, and that money did go back, because it has to go through the treasury and so forth, but did go back so the board could hire its investigators. That's just an idea for the nursing board to consider getting their own investigators.
Well, Representative Kidd, the problem with that is that governors come and go, and as a legislature, we're elected every 2 years, and by law, we cannot bind another legislature on what they do as far as the budget. So, the governor could do that and put it in their budget, but if the House or the Senate decided to take it out, they could. So, basically, that is something that you would just have to go on good faith that it would be there, and it might not be a steady or reliable source of income.
Thank you, ma'am. And, Mr. Chairman, at the present time, I'd like to make a motion.
At this particular time, let's answer a few more questions, and thank you so much. Number 13, who do we have down there? Representative Henson.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. Are there many differences between the original and the substitute? Or was it just some cleanup language that you saw was necessary?
Okay, the difference between this and the one that passed out of last year, they had left the advanced practice nurses off some of the lines. They would say the registered professional nurse and the LPN, but they wouldn't put advanced practice nurse in, so I went back and Betsy made it consistent with that. It said the board shall have alternative programs, and the board requested that we make them may have alternative programs. And the other one is the fact that the program is based on the funds being available to start the program.
So therefore, the bill that you initially dropped was the identical bill to last year. The bill we're looking at and working from
Has those
changes that you just referred to. Another question. I think one of the concerns, as much as you said, hospitals can be very much like the legislature down here where nothing's a secret. This doesn't only apply to nurses in hospital situations, is that correct?
No, it's
Okay.
any way, it would be any.
Therefore, if someone accuses someone else and it's brought before the board, is it kept quiet until it's investigated and found to be true or false? So, I mean, if hypothetically
Well,
one person accused another because they didn't like them, would it be kept quiet so that nobody would think that that nurse who was being accused was a bad nurse?
Well, I've never been reprimanded by the Board of Nursing, but I would certainly think it would be, and we have the chair of the Board of Nursing here who can address that.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. Thank you.
I mean, this reporting is something that happens frequently. Being married to a physician and being more involved with the Board of Medicine and have worked closely with them, they get reports from across the state all the time about physicians, and they're investigated. But you never hear about them, and they don't go in anybody's record because it's confidential with the Board of Medicine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. There's no more questions, but I'd have one or two if I may. What typically would be considered a minor incident?
Okay. I'll refer to Barry again.
That's another pretty broad term. Are those rules established? Let me just start this. Is those rules established in 1 year and they're held for an entire year, and the new ones or do you get something you've never seen before and you go, let's call it a minor incident?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. If I may continue with Barry, Madam Chair, are there punishment, for lack of a better word, or disciplinary action taken for minor incidents? From what to what? To the maximum? Does X amount of those minor incidences to the same person ever become major? You've written that same letter to that same person 3 times. Thank you, and just one more, and this is to Ms. Betsy. Ms. Betsy is the chairperson who oversees the Secretary of State's budget, and our subcommittee has heard all about the licensing in the last few days. and the costs involved in that during these tough economic times. You used the phrase a few moments ago about over-reporting. And this is on the spot, and I know, but if you were us, is there anything we could do right in? Is there anything that you think would curtail over-reporting by even just 10% or 20%? If we're not doing it now, and he's giving you a cost estimate of $4 million or $2 million, $2 million, I'm sorry, he gives you a cost estimate of $2 million. There's a part of me that goes, is there any way we can whittle that down to 1.5, or is there something that we can do that says this doesn't rise to that level, doesn't need an investigation done? Madam Chair, as this moves forward, I hope we look at that and get together and talk about that.
Okay, well, and I would say, Representative Reinders,
the Secretary of State's going to beat us up on that money. We know that.
And where is their representative? Tongue in cheek, have you ever known a department to ask for the bottom of what they think they need? Don't they always put it at the top of what they need with a little extra added on?
Madam Chair, the one phrase me and you have never heard, have ever heard since we've been up here is "thank you, I'm fully funded."
You're exactly right, but I'll be glad to. I think we would have to trust the board, and the Board of Nursing is made up of nurses from all areas of nursing. Nurses that, have worked in a nursing home or been the chief nurse in a nursing home, and from hospital and education. So they have that ability, and I think that you might have, maybe in the first year or two of this, some over-reporting until people got used to it. I would think the other thing, too, we would need to ask the Hospital Association, the Nursing Home Association, and as many associations that we ask to let their members know and talk to the nurses and the people that work for them what is considered a serious incident, what wouldn't be, so that maybe they could tell that over-reporting, because they're going to have to get this information about this law out. Just because we pass one and the Secretary of State or the board has enough money to implement it, we have no way of getting that information out. On any law, it's always done through the associations, even the judges, and letting the law and the lawyers, letting them know that laws have changed if the press doesn't pick it up.
Thank you so much. At this time, Representative Kidd, I'll recognize you for a motion if it's the appropriate one.
I'll make a motion to pass.
Got a motion to pass. Do I hear a second? Second, Representative Kaiser. Any discussion? Number 8. Who do we have there? Chairman Pruitt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to abstain due to the fact that I just got here and have no clue.
There's a lot that we can say right there.
Oh, we wish more people would do that more often. Thank you, Representative Pruitt.
All right, hearing no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, like sign. Congratulations, House Bill 50
Thank you
passes.
very much to the committee for your favorable vote. House Bill 68.
Madam Chair, trying to rise to the occasion here and see if I get his chair.
You're doing a fine job.
Rise me up to the occasion. And the process is, LaShawn Hughes here? Yeah. Okay, great. Madam Chair, this bill is the exact same bill that you introduced the latter part of the session last year, but didn't have a chance for it to go through rules. It simply they found out when you licensed the orthotists and prosthetists several years ago, and they were licensed under the Board of Medical Examiners, that they didn't look at continued education hours. And for a neurosurgeon, the continued education hours are 40, and I don't think an orthotist or prosthetist needs 40 hours of continued education. And the medical board would like to just have this bill so they could come up with rules and regulations on the number of hours appropriate for this particular license board. And LaShawn Hughes is here from the medical board, could explain it better than I can.
Okay. Okay. If you'll introduce yourself and say who you're with, LaShawn.
My name is LaShawn Hughes. I'm the director of the medical board. We're trying to model the continuing education for orthotists and prosthetists along the national model, which is 30 hours for their national requirement to keep their license. And we have one here if you need information about the profession.
Good afternoon. How can I help?
I guess by saying you think 30 hours will be enough continuing in education for you to make prosthesis.
What we're really looking for is for the board to be able to determine what those hours are. The national standard right now is 30, and that's through the American Board for Certification of Orthotics and Prosthetics. But that's a voluntary organization, but it's the best run organization for tracking CEUs in the country right now. The states that have passed licensure laws for orthotics and prosthetics have modeled it after that standard. That's the premium standard that's available, so that at least that establishes a minimum level of competency for practitioners in the state. But if the board is allowed to determine, as technology changes, the entry-level educational requirements into the field may be changing, it allows for the board to be able to move that. So we're not asking for it to be set at 30, just that the board be able to establish what's the appropriate level of CEUs.
So it gives them the flexibility in case, like you say, the standards change and you need to go to 40 or 50 or
Correct.
whatever
That's
it
right.
be. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yes.
Rep. Cindy Reinders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We battle all the time with what we call unfunded mandates, where a group, whether it be the magistrates, are asking the Association of County Commissioners to give so many clerk hours and let it be established by then, but that becomes a funded mandate on the county. So using that as an example, if you establish the rule on the number of hours, what keeps you from saying 100 or 120? I would prefer having something that if you're using the national standard of 30, if they were to raise their hours, I wouldn't object to you raising your hours of doing that to meet that national standard. But tell me why you need 100% carte blanche, whatever we determine.
Well, it would be the board of examiners to follow or set their own rules for continuing education hours. If this national organization was 30, they could adopt 30. If it was 40, they could adopt 40. Change the rules any year they wanted to, whatever is most applicable to make sure that they're protecting the public like they are today.
Right, and we all want to protect the public, but I guess I did a poor job of asking my questions. Let's pretend the national standard is 30. First of all, who pays for these continuing hours?
The licensure fees.
Okay, so what would happen if all of a sudden you decided we want, instead of 30, we want 50 or 70?
And when they,
Why wouldn't the national amount be good enough?
the different courses they have, wherever they take them to, that are approved by the board.
The one thing that is possible is more and more states are passing laws requiring practitioners to be licensed, which could make the national organization obsolete. And so the concern is if the American Board for Certification may become no longer a certification board, it is becoming the examination board for states that are, or the examination body that does the examinations and tracks the CEUs, and there may not be a need for certification in the future if enough states, pass license laws. So it gives the state the freedom to be able, and if that organization doesn't maintain the standards and the state decides because of technology change that it should be higher, it has the flexibility and the authority to do so. And the individuals or the practitioner owners of the practice pay for the classes for the CEUs for the individuals. There's not a cost to the state on those.
That answer your question, Representative Ryan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Representative Henson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that I worked on the initial bill on this legislation, and even learned how to pronounce all these words. And I gathered that what we did was we forgot to put in that once they're licensed, they should have CE hours. And what you're asking us to do is to leave it up to the board to promulgate rules and regs that they feel are correct, as opposed to our micromanaging
Yes, ma'am.
the number of hours. I
You're
do
right.
have one question about the hours, though, or the CE credits. Are they being offered in Georgia or online? For those that are licensed here in Georgia?
I know some are offered here in Georgia. You can answer the question.
I'm the treasurer of the State Society of Orthotists and Prosthetists, and we put on a 2-day educational conference every year that yields about 12 to 14 units, depending. There are some units that are available online through literature review, and not everybody's always able to attend the 2-day conference if you have multiple practitioners in the office. The national organization, while it's 15 a year, it renews every 5 years. So because the state license renews every 2 years, it can be a challenge to get the units just locally if you're only able to send half your staff 1 year and the next year. So it would 40 would make it difficult at the present time without sending them to a national meeting to get additional units.
So let me just follow up on that. When we refer to hours, 20 hours or 30 hours, is that every 2 years, every 3 years?
It's 30 hours every 2-year renewal period, so it turns out to be an average of 15 a year, which is the same as the national organization. It's just that certification renews every 5 years instead of 2 years. So it's a 75-hour total for the 5-year certification period. Still 15 units a year as an average. Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Okay.
actually does. Thank you. And will there be more being made available online, do you believe?
I would like to think so, but I don't know. You know, that's the educators in the field. Like I said, we provide an educational opportunity in the state, but it is a 2-day conference, and it's all volunteers. We're not professional educators. So there's different meetings and different avenues, and it's an ongoing development, but I couldn't comment to that.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A couple of questions. One, are there any other boards within the state that are setting the hours, or all other license hours for continuing education being set by the state?
Yes, the hours are set by the board. For physicians, we require 40 hours of continuing education every 2 years.
We have several, well, everybody has to have, real estate has to have continuing education, plumbers, heating and air conditioning people. Is that set by their board, or is that set by the state?
It's set by the boards.
All of them are set by the board at the current time.
All the licensing boards are set by the boards.
No, the hours of continuing education are set by each board and not by the state.
It's set by the boards.
So,
Are you absolutely sure, or does it vary to boards?
I think some are set by the board and some are set by law.
That's what we're asking. We think it varies. Do you?
Combination.
Betsy knows.
Well, yeah, and actually, if you look at your bill on line 33 and 34, clinical participants they have the same language. Their board establishes the number of hours, and also on page 1, respiratory care professionals establish their number of hours as well, just like the facility for these folks. So everyone else under this board is 40 hours by the statute. But those two boards presently do 7 hours.
so is the current in this particular, what we're asking for is now being set by the state? And you want to put it under the,
Pardon?
I'm sorry.
Pardon?
So this board set the current hours of training that it is today, and they just want to change it to 40? I'm sorry.
That's where it says that the board sets the hours, the bill for 40 hours for all of the different disciplines that they license. It then carves out respiratory care professionals
Okay, then my last question, Madam Chairman, would be, would you be willing to have a minimum so we know that it doesn't go to zero? Because certainly got to be something.
I will. Ooh, I feel a whole lot of untrust in this room.
Madam Chair, I think it's confusion on my part.
I mean, I'm just trying to be funny. I'm not as funny as Ed Reiner's is. I mean, you know, so you were. I never have not known the medical board to be lax on anything. Kevin, would that be your feeling on how they regulate doctors? Well, get ready. So, all right, Representative Pack, and then one last question.
Are there states that don't require Has there been studies done whether those people practicing in those states are less confident than the ones that require training?
I can't cite as to any studies. I believe there are 7 or 8 states that require license that then legally require continuing education units. The states that do not have licenses, anybody can hang up a shingle regardless of their education and fit and fabricate artificial limbs and braces for the citizens of their state with or without a certification or a license, and there's no requirement that they have any sort of continuing education units at all.
That wasn't exactly my question. My question is, out of those states that require licensure, our state currently requires 40 hours of continuing education. The other states that require less, or 0, are they less competent than the ones that practice in our state?
I assume to answer that question, somebody would have to call the state and see how many cases have been brought against individual licensed practitioners.
The reason I bring that up is this renewal fee and continuing education, and I'm an attorney, so I have to do them too.
Right.
Is really an expensive cost to the practitioner, which gets passed on to the consumer.
Right.
So if there's not a marginal benefit of requiring them to go through courses, I question whether or not raising it from 40 to 60 or even 100 would justify the cost associated with implementing that program.
I think it goes back to people who are licensed in general. Your question probably go to, does an MD have to be licensed by the state? Does a lawyer have to be licensed by the state? If the state says that the public will be better protected if they're licensed, then they come back and say, well, technology has changed a lot since you went to school in the 1950s versus the 2012, 13. Should they get some continuing education to be up to snuff on all the new technology that's out there today in order to protect the public? And if they are, if the legislature feels like it should be, then that's why you have mandated continuing education hours. For the medical doctors right now, it's set by law, it's 40 hours every 2 years. And this board, or this group, is licensed under that board rather than have its own licensure board. And they feel like 40 hours is too strenuous on this group because they don't require as much technological stuff and advancement as maybe a neurosurgeon might require. So they're asking for the board to be able to set the number of hours that's necessary for them to get relicensed. That's kind of simply put.
Representative Pack, there hasn't been a mention, except hypothetically, of raising the number of hours required. I mean, what they want to do is reduce them because the national association that accredits them right now has made the decision that 30 hours is an adequate amount of time, just like you would have the Orthopedic National Society deciding that, well, orthopedists needed this much to be recertified. So there's been no mention of raising the number of hours, except hypothetically.
Then they shouldn't object to that,
Right.
To what?
raising it. If the cost is lower, then there should be no objection to putting it
Well,
back
I think
on
what they're looking for is they don't need as many as 40 hours, and the Board of Medical Examiners who license them could go back and look and establish how many hours they should be required to have. It might be 38, it might be 28. But they would ascertain that and be in the rules and regulations, which y'all have a look at, and everybody has a look at, and come back, and that's what they'd have to have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There may be a time when there's an advancement in your profession that's going to require 60 or 80 hours of continuing education. Then, it's generally a better rule, at times to allow the professional board, whether it's legal or medical, to address the scientific and medical aspects relating to the continuing education. I mean, certainly the 40 hours was nailed down in healthcare. We'll shift gears a little bit. The ability to get continuing education, I presume, when you say you can do it as you can do it as a conference, or you can do it online, as in with subscription, or how? I mean, generally, I'll tell you, the medical profession, I presume Representative Pack does a lot of his continuing education online also. I mean, that's yeah.
Really?
Seriously?
Oh,
Okay,
good. Let's change that law.
Okay, we might have some new legislation coming.
I think we may have some new coming.
But anyway,
They would have to excuse
my
themselves
continuing
for being
education
biased.
is subscribing to the New England Journal of Medicine and doing it online and getting that down and printing it out and reporting it. It's not onerous, and other than the subscription, it's not painful from a financial standpoint. Is that easily accessible to you?
Not at that level yet. I think it has something to do with, I think, the fact that we're so small and so highly specialized, and there's so few of us practicing in the field. We have one scientific journal through which we can get online credits by reviewing articles. I would hazard, I myself have never earned a single credit online. It's all been at conferences, seminars, or workshops given by the manufacturer of new technology or something. That doesn't mean other people aren't getting more. I'm sure they're getting more than me, but I would, and this is just an estimate, that less than 20% of all the CEUs across the country are earned online, and most of them are through educational conferences and interactions.
And that may be more of your profession, and that presumably some of that is hands-on and
very much
third-dimensional,
yes.
not necessarily...
less scientific and very much more trade and craft and art.
Okay, I got you. At due time, I would move that we do pass if that's when the time is appropriate.
This is the time. This is the time. Do I have a due pass?
I'm recommending a do pass, please.
Okay, I have a due pass and a second. Is there any more discussion? Oh, my God. Okay, Representative Reinders.
I'd like, not being a physician or an attorney, I'm just a regular citizen, what do you think, I would love to hear from a couple people, what do you think the original thought was behind legislators before us on why it was important to cap continuing education hours? Part of my common sense was because it didn't want its members to be unreasonably burdened to keep something up, empowering the very organization where people go, I got to pay this into the organization becomes more powerful sometimes than the membership. What do you think, Dr. Watson, what do you think the original intent was on capping all kinds of continuing education, not just in medical, but in general? And do we favor letting anybody come in here from now on and say, any board, let's not establish any hours, you do what you want? Is that our mentality or our thinking?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the law says, if we read it there, Betsy, if I'm correct, line 15, it says not less than 40 hours. So it's not a cap, but a minimum. I'm okay with putting a minimum, but 30 hours is significant compared to that. I would hate to handicap the board in that. Now, if you want to put a minimum of 20 or 30, but I would really rather let the professionals make that decision personally. That's just my thoughts.
My only thought, Madam Chair, was there was a reason legislators before us said this many hours. and we give them the flexibility to come back and ask for more and whatever the case may be. And just to say unlimited, it ain't the minimum I worry about. It's the excessive.
Right.
There's nothing that would say you couldn't do 80 hours. Is that not correct? This bill says if you want to do twice as many on lines or clinical, you could do that. Am I right, Representative Kidd?
Yes, sir.
Are you fine with that?
Yes, sir.
Because you trust this particular board.
If it was too onerous, they're going to come back here and ask you to change it. And going through the rules and regulation process, Administrative Procedures Act, if it's too onerous, they're going to appeal to you not to adopt those rules.
And that.
Thank you.
And Representative Reinders,
Not just medical boards, but in general.
well, I think you're going at the reason backwards when they're caps. I mean, usually when in talking with the nursing board and trying to get continuing education for nurses, there's discussions going on with the board about what they consider adequate, and they come up with a number. It's not, at least in that discussion in trying to get nurses to have continuing education, it wasn't anything said about we don't want to be able to have it where we can't go over that. It was what the board that governs these people, that knows this profession, decides is an adequate number. I mean, and I can imagine, I don't know that you do biological prosthesis yet, but I can see a day and age where maybe there's electronics and everything else in them, and if somebody was going to make them, they might need 80 or 90 hours to be able to do the biological man or something. Okay, Representative Clark.
Madam Chair, just in response, maybe a comment, maybe just a comment, but I'd welcome any feedback. But I think in response to the comment you threw out, and that's where I was going, Chairman Reinders, is that I think one of the concerns that I have with wanting to cap anything like the CE hours is that I think that it's easy for example, I'm a licensed realtor or broker. We're having that discussion right now, increasing CE hours, and we haven't come to a decision on that. And there's no legislation this year, but it's probably coming. But I think one of the concerns that I would have is, as a realtor, I'm all for myself. I'm all for raising it to keep other people out and protect my industry. And I'm not saying there's not a time when it comes to reciprocated license and provide, public safety and all, that there's not a reason to have some CE hours. But I have the same concern, and would just like to voice that I would be all for capping it. And I appreciate your legislation, Representative Kidd, but just request a cap for those reasons.
I had worked on this initial legislation. In fact, did I author this?
No, ma'am. It went through your subcommittee,
Yeah.
part of Health and Ecology, then passed Health and Ecology Committee under Buddy Childers years ago.
I know it was many, many years ago. We didn't address CE credits. The issue that we were trying to deal with at the time, if I'm not mistaken, and Representative Kidd, was it that we were trying to get these folks licensed.
Right,
that was the whole intent. They were not licensed back when I dealt with this and had the subcommittee. It's not that we're trying to change things, to lessen it, to make it greater, and so forth and so on. It's trying to address some of the things that weren't addressed initially. Secondly, in terms of the 40 hours or 30 hours or whichever you're referring to, they're sitting here, they're telling you that there aren't a lot of courses being offered. Like for a medical doctor, there are a ton of courses out there you can take. The same thing with lawyers. You have a lot of options. These folks don't have a lot of options.
Okay. We have, Representative Hanson, I hate to cut you off. We got people ready to leave. Okay. For the new members on the committee, we have a motion. We have a second. The discussion. This is a time, and you will see there are no simple bills in this committee. This is a time when if somebody wants to offer an amendment, offer it. And you can either vote it up or the committee can vote it down. Can we do that before we have other committee members leave? Representative Pack, you want to offer the...
I have an amendment.
Okay.
I would like to amend line 15 by striking the words of not less than.
Wait. Representative Johnson.
And insert language not to exceed.
That's fine.
That's on line 15, so striking not less than.
And then striking lines 40 through 48.
Not to exceed. Lines 40 to 48.
Madam Chair, I just asked the board, which is the real author of this, they said they don't have a problem with that.
Pardon?
And I just asked the board, who is the one who brought this forward, they said they don't have a problem. Did that change?
With striking 40 through 48? I think
talking about
that,
the first
Representative
change.
Pack, I think that's inappropriate. It's saying the board shall be, if you're saying not more than 40, this is saying the board shall be authorized to establish the number of hours required biannually, so they still have that ability with not more than 40 hours.
I was referring to his first change on the first page, line 15.
Okay.
We're capping it at 40 hours maximum, so they can go
Right.
down.
Pardon, I understand that, but the
Right.
board has the ability to say, okay, I would, they only have 20 hours if they wanted to. So it
Right.
would be inappropriate to strike 40 through 48. Huh?
If you
Are we changing anybody
No,
else?
no. You have lines.
Just a minute, just a minute.
Yeah, if we did what Representative Pack is suggesting, it would accomplish the same thing. We basically say that this board, I mean, would also not have, they couldn't exceed 40 hours. But so the only groups then that still this wouldn't apply to is the respiratory care profession that comes out of paragraph 2, and the clinical cure team that comes out of paragraph 3, which would still be an exception to their reference hours. It would still accomplish the original intent of the bill in a different way.
So it's appropriate to leave 40 through 48 in?
Well, with this amendment, if it does that, then it won't have an effect on it. It would basically, if it did that, it would only affect the physicians, PAs, the ones that aren't started out.
Oh, so it would affect more groups. Okay, we have an amendment. Do I hear a second? Or on the, and a second. Everyone in favor of the amendment, do you want to, okay, Representative Watson. Discussion on the amendment.
Betsy, clarify this for me. You're affecting physicians, PAs, acupuncturists, and everybody if you change this. And to delve into something beyond the scope of this bill, I think is beyond the scope of this legislation if you change that. I would, am I wrong? That changes it for physicians? I
see what you mean. So what
Okay.
we want to do is
Okay.
So we have an amendment and a second. Is there?
On that amendment, Representative Pack, I think we'll need to also amend lines 22 and 23 as well.
let me amend my amendment. How's that? Okay. So
And in the future, I know that sometimes bills are brought before this committee that they're, especially toward the end of session, you will find bills that we have to put in here and move pretty quickly. But when a bill has been out for 2 or 3 days, I would appreciate seeing amendments like this ahead of time so we do not go through this in the committee. Okay. Representative Pack.
well, Madam Chair, without the testimony, how am I supposed to offer the amendment?
Well, I mean, I'm sure you would have had an opinion, Representative Pack,
Well,
for a major amendment like this.
to scratch the First Amendment suggestion, then I would request that in line 44,
Okay, you're not doing anything on line 14 and 15?
leave it as is.
Which way? The way it is.
Leave it as is, right? The current language.
Okay?
After the word earned,
On what line is it again?
44,
Okay.
and insert the word however. The maximum number of hours of continuing education required for renewal of licensure shall not exceed 40 hours.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the revision, the amendment to the amendment. Betsy, could you please read that now? So we would not do anything to line 15. We would leave it like the bill is printed. Okay.
Yes, Madam
thank you.
Chair.
Okay, Betsy, will you read the amendment? The amendment to the amendment.
So the only change we made is on line 44, adding after the word earned, however, the maximum number of hours of continuing education required for renewal of licensure shall not exceed 40 hours.
Representative Watson.
Make sure we're clear here. This does not include anybody but the orthosist and prosthesist, correct?
Okay. Is there any other clarification? Representative Reyners.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to hear from the author of the bill. If y'all had a chance to digest that, are you okay with it?
I'm okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the board's okay?
Board's okay.
All right. All right. Since we're a little informal here, let's just call it an amendment. All right. We have the amendment as read by Betsy. That was a working amendment. Do I hear a second on that amendment? Okay. We have a do pass on the amendment and a second. Does anybody want it read again? Everybody okay with it? All right. Everybody in favor of the amendment as presented by Representative Pack and read by Betsy, say aye. Anyone opposed? No. The ayes have it. Thank you, Representative Pack. Okay, now to the bill. We have a motion and a second for a do pass as amended. Well, no, as amended. You got it? Would you like to go back? Like you restate that? Okay, Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion for due pass as amended by Representative Pack.
Okay, we have a motion to do pass and a second. Is there any discussion now on this portion of the bill? No. Hearing no one that wants to discuss anything else about this simple bill. If you are in favor of the passage of the bill as amended, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, say no. The ayes have it as improved by the health community. And thank you very much. Okay. Now, let's see. We have presentation. Ms. Swartz, you'd like to make your presentation. Tell us who you are and who you're with, and you have 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Schwartz, and I'm the Executive Director of Mental Health America of Georgia. We're a nonprofit mental health education and advocacy organization. I'd like to begin by thanking Madam Chair Sharon Cooper for her sponsorship of Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week in Georgia, and Governor Deal for signing the proclamation. The Awareness Week is February 3rd through 9th, so we are right in the middle of the week right now commemorating this event. Thank you also to all the members of the committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today about a very important but often overlooked issue. I'm here today to represent my organization as well as the Georgia Coalition on Maternal Mental Health, but perhaps more importantly, I'm representing all women, past and future, who have suffered or will suffer from a maternal mental illness. I'm a survivor of antepartum and postpartum depression and anxiety, and I'd like to share my story with you. If you're like me, learning about statistics or research about an illness or any subject matter is very helpful, and we've provided a 3-page handout to you, which you should have received. And you can refer to this later to get a better idea of the prevalence and symptoms and effects of these illnesses. But in my statement today, I will not be speaking about statistics and research, because as helpful as they are, when taken alone, they really abstract the issue. Hearing a real person discuss his or her lived experience puts a face on a statistic and puts a story behind the research. This is the first time that I've spoken publicly about my experience, so please bear with me. It's a very personal subject, and it deals with a tremendously troubling time in my life. Throughout my adolescent and adult life, I battled clinical depression. Because of effective treatment, though, I lived in recovery for years. I attended Emory University and received a bachelor's degree in psychology, then went on to obtain a master's in social work at the University of Georgia. After working for about 8 or 9 years, I went back to school and earned a dual degree from Georgia State University, a master's in business administration and a master's in healthcare administration. I got these last 2 degrees while working at the Emory University School of Medicine. After consulting for a little while, I became the executive director of my organization, Mental Health America of Georgia, in 2007. And before I became a mom, I knew about postpartum depression and actually started a program at my organization shortly after I started. And the program was about, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, which is what we're talking about today. Based on what I knew at that time, I mistakenly thought that postpartum depression was simply depression brought on by the birth of a baby. But after I had my baby, I discovered that postpartum depression is completely different from clinical depression. Antepartum depression, which is depression while you are pregnant, is completely different as well, and I suffered from both. Because of time limitations today, I'll speak mainly about my postpartum illnesses, but during my pregnancy I suffered the antepartum, the terrible anxiety and depression, the likes of which I had never known, even as a person who had dealt with depression and anxiety throughout my life. 15% of all women experience antepartum depression and anxiety, yet virtually none of us are screened for it or educated on it. I know I was not, and I went to one of the largest and most successful OBGYN practices in Atlanta. After having my son, I was in the hospital for 6 days. During this time, my mood and anxiety seemed to be in check, so I held out hope that I wouldn't have to suffer any postpartum illnesses. After all, the antepartum ones really had done me in. Unfortunately, postpartum depression and anxiety took hold the day I went home from the hospital. Postpartum depression occurs in about 10 to 15% of all postpartum women. Even this statistic is low, though, because it's based only on reported cases and doesn't include those women who suffered in silence. Postpartum depression is the most common, yet the most underdiagnosed complication of childbirth in the United States. Yet the vast majority of us are never screened for these illnesses, and it doesn't occur to us that the out-of-whack thoughts and feelings that we're having are actually symptoms of an illness. After all, shouldn't moms with healthy, beautiful newborns just be blissfully happy? As it is, stigma is alive and well with general mental illness. The stigma surrounding a new mother who is depressed is much worse because of the expectation that she be in a constant state of euphoria after having the blessing of a newborn. If we're not euphoric, we pretend that we are. We force ourselves to put on a mask of happiness, while inside we're not only devastated, but we're also tormented, asking ourselves why we can't feel what we wish we could. We convince ourselves that we are monsters. I was never screened for these illnesses in the hospital. During a 6-day hospital stay, not one healthcare practitioner even mentioned it. My homecoming was the beginning of my journey into hell. My postpartum illnesses made my antepartum one seem like a walk in the park. To try to capture in words the terror, the anguish, the self-hatred, and the guilt that these diseases cause is impossible. But please be clear that the illnesses cause these thoughts and feelings that I will try my best to describe. My love for my son came to me in waves. There were times when I would cry and thank God for this miracle. At other times, though, I felt completely and utterly disconnected from my baby. I'd always been a capable, successful person, a type A personality, which a lot of people call people like me. But for the first time in my life, I felt that I had been given a mountain that I just could not climb. I had no idea what to do, and my son cried nonstop, and everything I tried to do failed. He had colic, and getting him to sleep was nothing short of torturous. I wanted so badly to breastfeed, but my milk never came in. Again, I failed. And the exhaustion. I began questioning my ability and had fear around bathing my baby, swaddling him, feeding him, burping him. With each perceived failure, my confidence in giving my son a good life diminished. I, who normally could accomplish anything I set my mind to, was afraid to be left alone with my child because I was scared to do even the most basic of tasks to take care of him. I became awestruck by my parents and by all other parents who had raised a child. How had they accomplished this daunting task? In my eyes, they were nothing short of heroic. I decided that I simply wasn't who I thought I was. I thought I was strong. No more. I was the weakest person in the world. Yet no one saw that but me. I'd always been proud of my accomplishments, and now I felt the complete opposite. Here was what should have been the biggest accomplishment and the best accomplishment of my life, my child. Yet I couldn't handle it. I was completely ashamed. My sick mind was telling me that I'd ruined my life. More importantly, though, I felt I'd unfairly brought a baby into the world who was destined to be miserable because of me, so I'd ruined his life too. My thoughts went to putting him up for adoption or giving him to my brother and his family, and with these thoughts came the kind of guilt that's impossible to bear. And the feeling of being completely alone because we don't realize that we're sick, and there is a reason why we're having these thoughts. How could I ever admit any of this to anyone? Where was I? I wanted my old self back. I had become a shell of myself. I couldn't eat. I rarely slept. And when I did sleep and then awoke, I couldn't wait until I could go back to sleep again and escape my self-condemnation. Thoughts of suicide crossed my mind. For the first time in my life, I understood why people take their own lives. When the thought of living is more painful than that of dying, you yearn to put an end to it all. Tragically, I identified with a woman named Jenny, for whom the organization Jenny's Light was founded and named. According to her father, Bob Gibbs, Jenny did well during delivery, but then she struggled with nursing and was reluctant to take her baby, Graham, out of the house for the first few weeks. She was also adjusting to not working, not sleeping, and having to care for her newborn. But other than that, things seemed to be normal to her family and to her friends. Graham also got easier to care for as the weeks went by, and everyone thought that Jenny was adjusting well. Then out of the blue, on December 19th, 2007, at about 7 p.m., Jenny went into the backyard and took Graham's life and then her own. Graham was 7 weeks old. As is so common with women who experience these illnesses, Jenny pretended to be okay when in reality she was miserable. Much like I was feeling, I'm sure. How do you explain this to anyone? That I went between loving my child so much one minute and then the next wishing I had never gotten pregnant? What sort of mom was I? I didn't deserve this beautiful child. During all this, I thought about postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, but even though I'm a mental health professional, my brain was too sick to recognize that these illnesses were causing my thoughts and my actions and my behaviors. Instead, I just kept telling myself that I was a monster, that this wasn't a sickness. If I had known and realized that, it would have been a relief. Thank God for postpartumprogress.com. One especially bad night, I finally found the energy to go online and visit this blog. I began reading other women's stories, and one after another I saw myself in them. Could it be that I was truly ill, that I could be treated, that there was hope for myself and for my baby? So at midnight that night I left a message for my doctor, and by the next day I had started on treatment, and slowly I became myself again. Gradually the clouds parted. The hands that had been around my neck were no longer choking me. I distinctly remember the day when I knew I'd be okay, and it was when my son was a little over 7 months old. For the first time since before I was pregnant, I felt more like myself again. Felt a feeling of happiness. Since that time, I've put my life back together, but I still carry the guilt that I was unable to enjoy my pregnancy and unable to enjoy those first 7 months of my son's life. And I remain fearful to this day that all of that had some sort of effect on him and our relationship. But I'm beyond thankful for that little boy. He'll be 2 years old on Friday. He is, excuse me, he's the love of my life. And the pure, unadulterated love, I have for my son is exemplified by the fact that I am now considering having another baby. Although I don't know whether I can or will have another child, the fact that I would even consider it is a testament to the fact that I am a survivor, that these illnesses can be treated. There's effective treatment if they're identified first and if women are educated on them. This experience made me stronger and gave me the motivation to raise awareness about maternal mental illness. These devastating illnesses are so common, yet they're largely ignored. Every woman is susceptible, even those who have never had a mental health issue with previous pregnancies. They can still get this in subsequent ones. I'm asking for your help in just learning about this issue and raising awareness about maternal mental illness, encouraging all the women you know, your wives, sisters, daughters, friends, to educate themselves on these issues and to encourage healthcare practitioners to screen for these illnesses throughout pregnancy and during the first year postpartum, because these illnesses can hit all the way till a child's first birthday. Our healthcare system must take into account the whole person and not just the physical ailments. By advocating for this and helping to destigmatize maternal mental illness, you will save lives and you will enrich the world with healthy and happy babies and families. Before closing, I'd like to acknowledge and congratulate the other survivors, supporters, and champions who are in the audience today. I'd like to recognize them by asking to stand and once again put faces to the statistics. Thank you. And to any women who might be currently battling maternal mental illness, know that effective treatment is out there and you will get better. Borrowing Catherine Stone's term, who's the author of postpartumprogress.com, we are all warrior mamas. It's the responsibility of us all to make sure that our state's children and families are given a chance, and that if we have the means to prevent illness, that we do everything in our power to keep women and families from suffering. Please help in expanding the dialogue about maternal mental illness and encouraging routine education and screening practices. I hope my stories help bring understanding to these illnesses and bring them out of the shadows. And I and MHA of Georgia look forward to being an ongoing resource for all of you. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much for coming, and to the other ladies and for sharing your story. I know it's very emotional, and for working toward awareness. And this meeting goes out over the web. We have a physician on our staff. As a colleague. Sorry, Dr. Watson. As vice chair, I guess you're on the staff. And there's another young, budding physician soon to be here in the audience. The Hospital Association is here. Lots of women in the audience to help spread the word. So you're coming down to testify before us, and coming to support her is very important. So thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate your efforts. And to the new members on this committee, one of the things that we do is part of our role is education and learning about new problems and helping to spread that word. So this is one of the reasons why we will have people come in and talk to us about things that are certainly new the more we learn about medicine and the human body and the human mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are adjourned, and there's no quick and easy meeting in health.